It's really easy for me to develop like a cruel storyline against myself where I can paint myself like almost any way without these memories. Like I can go into a storyline that is just attacking myself and I don't have evidence against it. And so I have to ask other people who are there.
Do you want to be part of the podcast? Go to shanesbraindomain.com and click on the Aphantasia section. There you will find a question or prompt and an opportunity to contribute your thoughts and experiences. Simply record and submit your response, and you could be featured on a future episode. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. On today's episode, we discuss sensitive topics such as the death, grief, and loss. So listener discretion is advised. It is also important to note that for this particular discussion, I have asked my guests to stay away from talk about religious beliefs or the afterlife. I am not against talking about such things on this podcast. However, in this instance, I wanted the discussion to revolve around the mind's eye and the here and now as much as possible. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain. And today we are talking about aphantasia, visualization, and grief. I have several guests with me today for this discussion. I'm grateful for each one of them for taking the time to discuss this sensitive topic. And I think it'll be really insightful. So thank you, everybody. All right. So we'll go around and I'll have each one of you introduce yourselves. And what I'd like you to do is just tell us a little bit about yourself and why you were interested in joining the discussion today. And also let us know where you fall on the visualization scale. In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the apple graph. If you would like to view the apple graph to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to view the apple graph for whatever reason, it is a graph divided into 6 sections. In the number 6 section, there is a very detailed image of a red apple. In the number 5 section, it is the same image but with less detail. Number 4 is still in color but has less detail and more basic shapes instead of detailed hues and gradients. Number 3 is the less detailed apple but in gray tones without the color. Number 2 is a simple outline of the apple. And number 1 is blank, indicating no visualization whatsoever. This is called aphantasia. All right, so let's start with Cole.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Cole. I'm Shane's son. I've co-hosted on the podcast several times, as many of you know. I am a 4 on the visualization scale, on a good day of 5, but usually a 4. I work as a clinical coach in an autism therapy center.
All right. Thank you, Cole. BK?
Hello. My name is Brett Kelly. After appearing on Shane's Brain podcast, we've asserted that I am actually in the opposite end of the aphantasia spectrum. So a hyperphantasia haver, if you will.
Yeah. A 6.
But actually I was inspired to come on because I had such a great time talking with Shane on the episodes that I recorded with him. I do have a lot of experience dealing with grief, trauma, loss type of stuff throughout my life in different ways. And I thought it might be an interesting way to talk about some of those things and how it relates to how my brain works.
All right. Thank you. All right, Michael.
Hi, Shane. I'm Michael Christensen. Shane and I go way back when I used to write together on a website called Writers on the Loose. I got interested in his aphantasia when he brought it up because I'd never heard of it. I think I'm somewhere around a 5 or 6. He asked me to picture an apple I think I can nail the 5 or 6, and just a question of how much detail do you want? What you tell me, I'll fill it in.
All right. Thank you, Michael. All right, Stacy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Therian. I'm multisensory aphantasic. I'm like a 0, or I guess it starts at 1, but I'll put myself at 0. And it's kind of difficult for me to be here because I'm pretty raw in grief right now, but I really wanted to be here. This idea of neurodivergence or even aphantasia and hyperphantasia and grief is something that hasn't been discussed very much as far as I know. And yeah, I'm very curious to hear everyone's perspectives and just learn more. Like the thing that I've realized is that for me, grief is this learning process of learning how to live with loss and realizing your brain is pretty different from the neurotypical brain at the same time has been kind of a difficult journey. So yeah, I'm just glad that we're having this discussion today.
All right. Thank you, Stacy. All right, Kristen.
I'm Kristen Erickson. I live in Nebraska. I am a professor, associate professor at Bellevue University. I teach in their clinical mental health counseling program. I've been in the mental health field for about 30 years and incredibly passionate about grief and loss ever since I did an internship back in the 90s at a hospice and did bereavement counseling. And ever since then, I've always been passionate about grief and loss, particularly disenfranchised grief and loss. And that is something that I feel actually ties in well with aphantasia. I am here because I'm always looking for opportunities to talk about anything disenfranchised. I've always wanted to educate anybody I can about grief loss from a counseling kind of perspective. But here I'm not necessarily in that counseling role per se, but I've seen some things and experienced some things that have been tough. And I also have aphantasia, and it's been a few years since I've learned about it. But ever since I learned about it, I keep thinking about all the ways it plays out in our lives. And one of them is the many losses that I have experienced. So I'm looking forward to having these discussions, looking forward to seeing where the conversation goes.
All right. Thank you. All right, Elena.
Hi, my name's Elena Delisle, and I learned about aphantasia probably like about 3 years ago, and I'm still just as fascinated by it. I am definitely the lowest of the low. I have aphantasia. I cannot visualize at all. And I've also gone through a lot of loss, which is why I was interested when Shane asked me if I wanted to do this. Yeah, I lost my mother at the age of 16, and I've lost my father, my brother, other people as well. I've been very interested in how somebody with aphantasia grieves compared to somebody who can visualize. Whenever I try to tell someone about aphantasia, they're like, but can you see your daughter's face? But can't you see your husband's face? And I'm like, you don't get it. I can't see anything. And so I can't visualize my mother's face, and I think the interesting thing is that I don't really go into grief unless I'm looking at a photo of her or maybe looking at her handwriting and something that she wrote for me. I have a very strong sort of out of sight, out of mind. So I've wondered a lot if that's healthier or not healthier. But I don't think that I grieve in the same way as somebody who can, I read in books, somebody will say, I can still see her face. And I'm like going, they actually mean they can see her face. Or that image will be printed in my brain forever of my mother in the hospital, all hooked up to machines. I'll never forget it. And so I don't have that. But yeah, so I'm just really fascinated by this topic. And that's why I'm here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, very good. And I just wanted to mention SDAM real quick as well. That stands for Severely Deficient Autobiographical Memory. I believe Stacy and Elena both believe they have SDAM as well, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the grieving piece definitely comes in with that as well. Like, well, I don't really remember. To me, my memories are more like a story. They don't feel like they happened to me. And they're also little blippets. There's not a lot of memory there.
All right. So the main reason we are doing this episode today is because of Stacy. I reached out to her and asked if she had any ideas for future episodes. And she mentioned that she wanted to do one on grief and talk about her grief. So I would like to start this just by turning the time over to her a little bit. Stacy, just tell us a little bit about what you've been going through, your experiences and your frustrations, and just kind of set the stage with what you've been going through, and then we can all respond and chime in.
Okay. Thank you, Shane. Where to start? I've been thinking a lot about where stories start and where stories end, and the meaning of that alone. So where to start seems very significant to me. I really wanted to talk about grief because I feel like our society just is very grief illiterate, and we don't talk about it enough. And I've really experienced that this year. My mom died in March from, sorry, I'm trying not to apologize for crying either, because I'm trying to normalize crying. So here we go. She died in March from ovarian cancer. She was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer in 2021. So we knew this was coming, but at the same time, like, you can't prepare yourself for the actual end. I've heard many people say this, and it was true for me too, where the end came just so fast after a long illness. And I've kind of come to understand that grief doesn't start with death. It starts when you realize like something or someone precious to you won't be around forever. I don't really like the term anticipatory loss. It doesn't feel exactly right, but I haven't come up with another term. So I was there with her in the hospital and then with the surgeon when he pretty much said there was no way forward. And then with her in home hospice and there with her when she died and giving her medication to manage the pain while she was in home hospice. So like the whole experience was one of the most traumatic of my life. And like before this happened, I would like flippantly say like, oh, I'm aphantasic. Like trauma doesn't get to me. And I have had past trauma that does feel that way where like I can't relive it. Like that's impossible for me. I can't visualize it again. But this has like thrown me into a whole new definition of self, or like confusion about self, I guess. And I wanted to talk about this just because like I feel like everyone's grief is so individual and everyone's brain is so individual. And when you're neurodivergent, like when you have aphantasia or maybe hyperphantasia, like your way of grieving may be pretty different from others. And I don't want to say that my way of grieving, like, oh, because I'm aphantasic, like my grief is like this, and therefore other aphantasics' grief is like this. Like I absolutely do not believe that. I just want to share my story because if it resonates with someone else who is aphantasic, I want them to hear this, because like I'm searching for all these answers to questions that I'll probably never get. But I just think like this is such an important conversation. And I do have SDAM too. And so I think that's making my grief harder. I've heard other people with SDAM kind of say that it makes their grief easier. It's just, for me, it's playing out very differently, where my memory or lack thereof, like, opens the door for me to be extra cruel to myself. Like I'll wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about times when I could have been nicer, could have been more compassionate, could have like been more patient with my mom. And since I can't relive memories and since I don't have many memories, like it's really easy for me to develop like a cruel storyline against myself where I can paint myself like almost any way without these memories. Like I can go into a storyline that is just attacking myself and I don't have evidence against it. Like and so I have to ask other people who are there. Like I have to ask my partner to remind me, like, and he'll say like, oh no, like you told your mom how much you appreciated her. You did this and that. And I don't have a memory of it that I can rely on myself. So thank you for listening to all of that. It's like there hasn't been a space where I've been able to share like this, exactly like that before. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable. Anyone would like to respond to that?
I was just thinking about how you said other people with aphantasia say that grieving is easier. I wonder about that a lot. Like, I'm not really sure. I know I can't pull up visual memories of the people who I've lost, but I will say when the loss first happened, I had like a strong wave of very intense grief. So when my mother died when I was 16, I totally numbed out and didn't deal with that grief until I went into therapy at like the age of 41. But when we did start bringing it up, I did go into intense grief, even though I didn't have a picture in front of me. So I feel like I was able to move through a lot of the grief. Like when I found out my brother died, it was like getting hit by a truck, and I was in like unbearable grief for like 2 days. Can't barely catch a breath kind of thing. But then I do think that my inability to have like relive a memory, like you said, like makes it so that I have a much more sort of compartmentalized situation in terms of grieving. Like I think if I was able to actually visually relive a memory, I would probably be sort of processing that grief a lot. I feel it on Mother's Day when I think, oh, my mother would have been such a great grandmother. Like, I can't believe my kids never got to meet her. I will feel it then. I do wonder. I don't know how other people grieve, but I think the aphantasia makes it different for sure. And the SDAM.
Okay, I'd like to hear from the visualizers. Does any of that ring true to you, or just tell us a little bit about your experiences and how it may differ from Stacy and Elena?
So I also lost my mom 10 years ago, 2015, also from cancer. So Stacy, I know what that's about. I know the slow decline and then moments of hope and the remission. And then when it happened pretty fast. We all got to come home and say our goodbyes. And anticipatory grief concept, I relate to that really well because I've just kind of been, I guess, denying it. I guess like, okay, mom's got cancer. Yeah, it's probably going to kill her eventually. But when I got to the hospital and saw her all hooked up, I had this overwhelming sense of this is it. Yeah, we visited for a little bit. My wife and I, she had to get some hygienic thing taken care of by the nurse. So we stepped outside and that's when it just kind of hit me. My mom's gone. Mostly what I see in my mind, after 10 years, it's kind of hard to actually bring her up as a live image. Like what would she look like right now or what would she look like before? So what I see in my mind are pictures of photographs that I like. Famous picture of her in our family where she's woken up at dark 30 to help make breakfast before we go to school, and she's sitting there or standing there in the kitchen with her nightie on, scrambling some eggs or something. So I can picture that really easily in my head. But live images, so to speak, kind of harder to come up with. It does help to have those photographs on hand. So someone like me who can actually visualize things, if you look at the picture, then you can then kind of animate that and remember, oh yeah, she looked like this, she sounded like this. It's kind of hard for me now to recall her voice. I'm really annoyed at T-Mobile because they deleted my last voicemails with her when I switched phones a few years ago. Jerks. If I try hard enough, I can maybe imagine her voice.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think I might have more of an abstract insight because the thing that really touched with me in terms of the negative thoughts or not even negative thoughts, but the manifestation of challenging yourself and beating yourself up over things and wishing things. That is something I've dealt with universally throughout my entire life, is holding yourself up to a higher standard, or in this particular case, using your own terms, beating yourself up over did I do the right thing? Could I have done better? I find myself in that train of thinking a lot. And I ascribe that to I lose a lot of sleep because of that. Some of that is related to direct loss of people that have been close to me. I relate to on that a lot because when you're only talking to yourself about those things, at least for me, and I'm saying this as myself, and maybe you can relate and maybe not. I hope you don't, because it's not going to be a nice thing I'm saying. But when you find those moments, like, someone that you don't see anymore, and you kind of go, man, I really should have been in this moment, I should have done this, or I should have done that, or I should not have been this short, or I should have valued this when I had it. The habituation or the repetition of that can accidentally magnify those moments. So like the more you're focusing on what you're not doing, you're so focused on what you think you didn't do, you're blocking out the whole of this picture that has led up to it. You know what I mean? It's almost like I'm a performer, so I deal with that. I deal with this a lot, where it's like I've had plenty of performances where I've tripped or I've said something wrong, and I knew that I messed up, and I knew that I messed up, and then I would talk to someone who watched the performance or someone who was on stage with me, and they go, "It was fine. No, you're good." And so, like, yeah, you can, don't beat yourself up for tripping on a stage. Just remember the entire play. The point is that sometimes when you're thinking of mistakes you make, you block out the great memories that you have. And I know I've been guilty of that a lot, where you hyper focus on that. And sometimes it helps to challenge yourself on those feelings, you know, and for every bad thought, for every mistake you made, you have to force yourself to remember, but you know what, we had these great memories together too. So like when you were talking about that struck me, because I mean, I deal with that with grief and loss, but I deal with that in all aspects of my life of beating yourself up and finding the thing that you're like, no, I should have done better. I can't do better. But it is also helpful to kind of invite more of those feelings of counterbalancing that as well.
I have a really good example of that. When I went into therapy, I was talking about my father who died of cancer. He was in hospice for about a month. He loved having foot massages, and I just basically planted myself by his bedside and rubbed his feet for like hours and hours every single day. The hospice nurse said, you know, at this point, you probably don't have to encourage him to drink water. Like if he wants to stop drinking water, you know. And so like pretty much the last thing I said to him was, Dad, you don't have to drink water. If you don't want to drink water, he goes, I know. And that was like the last thing we said. And I was just beating myself up like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that to him and everything. And my therapist goes, maybe you should focus on the hours and hours you spent rubbing his feet instead. It's like, okay, well, you know, true. You know, all things in perspective.
So as you're all talking, I'll go ahead and chime in as some of my experiences. I have a little bit different kind of thing to aphantasia that I didn't realize until being on the podcast with Shane. But I don't see anything when I close my eyes, like it's just, you know, black. But I visualize, I see a lot of things. I just don't see it. I don't even know how to explain it because it just doesn't make sense and it's hard to explain. But my mom, she passed away 1993, so it's been a long time. I was in grad school working on my first master's degree. I sometimes will see things, but it's because of the pictures that I look at. When I look at the pictures, then that's where like the stories pop in really quickly. Like I'll remember this picture of her holding roses. My grandmother had a wonderful rose garden, and my mom loved going and spending time at my grandmother's rose garden. And so I have a picture of her holding these roses and just beaming. And so when I see that picture, that's when I can like, you know, kind of hear her voice. That's when I can replay that day of what that was like and what the conversations were like. So I remember the first time when I stopped being able to see her face. That was terrifying for me because I adored my mom. And it was, sorry, I don't mean to get emotional, but it was really hard. Like, oh my gosh, am I going to forget her? And because I couldn't pull up her face. So when I look at the pictures of her, that's when I can have a whole bunch of other memories that pop in my mind and I actually can see them. One of my favorite memories of her is as a young kid, we were walking to the store and all of a sudden she just started running. I can easily picture this day when I think of it and her running down the street. And I said, Mom, why are you running? We're not in a hurry. And she turns around and she goes, because I can, and raises her hands in the air. And it is one of my favorite memories of her. And I have so many of those beautiful memories, but I also have when my brother passed away, that's more recent. And my brother passed away a year and a half ago. My dad 3 years ago. I can close my eyes and visualize them, even though I can't see them because I just see black, but I can oddly see them and pull them up and pictures and memories and conversations, and something's almost like it's a little movie, even if I can't see it. That is so much easier for me to recall. So I can see them, but I can't see them. I don't even know how to explain that because that's so bizarre. So I know my aphantasia is a little bit different maybe from other people, and I didn't realize that until, talking with Shane. But it's hard to know how to talk to people about not being able to see that person's face anymore in your mind.
I haven't lost anyone in my immediate family like many of you. But a few years ago, we lost my grandpa, Shane's dad. that was a pretty big loss for the family. I was pretty close to him, and so that was a pretty hard one to go through. I mean, if you go back and listen to, we did an episode on me in this podcast. I don't have the strongest visual abilities, but I am very strong, somewhat stronger than others as far as my tactile sense. My grandpa always made jokes that he was going to haunt us after he died. He was a silly person. He would always make jokes that he was going to haunt us after he died and stuff. And it's funny because in some ways he does for me. And I don't think this is in a religious way or anything like that. I think this solely has to do with my tactile memory. But I still feel him a lot. I know exactly what his hug feels like, down to the wrinkles in his skin. He had a really bad hip, and I remember exactly how he would kind of like awkwardly bend in, like he couldn't bend very well at the waist. I remember how he would kind of like lean in with his whole body with a hug, and I can feel that. It makes me cry every time. It is comforting. When we watch football games as a family, like my grandpa was a huge college football fan, I can reimagine those scenarios and kind of like almost feel his presence in the room. Like I've watched enough football games and stuff with him to know how he would react to certain things that are going on in the game. I mean, that can have some comforting properties. It can make this thing worse sometimes.
All right. Well, thank you all for sharing those experiences. Just for my personal experience real quick, like a lot of things in my life, I kind of have a hard time really understanding my experience with this. Like Cole said, I lost my dad about 3 years ago. In a lot of ways, it feels very distant. Like I've described my thoughts as they're never like in my face. They're never front and center. And that's kind of the way my grief feels as well. It kind of feels a little bit removed, a little bit detached. But at the same time, I am so extremely comfortable with the way I am with my aphantasia, and I've embraced it 100%. I like the way things are because I still have memories of my dad, and I can still think of him the way that I do. And that's enough for me, and I'm content with it. I'm happy with it. So I want to shift gears a little bit. Stacy mentioned earlier that we as a society are a little bit, how'd you put it?
I'm not sure, but sometimes grief illiterate.
Yeah, grief illiterate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I talked a little bit with Kristen about some of this before, and she mentioned some of the things that people say that they probably shouldn't say. Kristen, could you tell us a little bit more about some of those things that people should probably not say to someone who is grieving? And I also wanted you to chime in on the fact that I had a really hard time finding any grief counselors that wanted to come on this podcast today. And not to throw any of them under the bus because, I totally get it and their reasons are valid. But does that say anything about how unknown this aphantasia thing is and how unknown it is in the counseling world? If you could just touch on that as well.
My first individual client that I had seen in my hospice, I'll never forget the gentleman coming in and saying his wife had passed away from breast cancer. And he was about 30, she was about 28-ish. And he said everything in the room was the same. It was about 9-ish months later. Everything's the same. He said even the book on the nightstand was to the same page. He says, I just can't get myself to put these things away. But it was in that moment that I realized, oh my heck, I can't fix this. And then I realized, wait, that's not what grief and loss is all about. And I remembered all the awful things people had said to me. And there's several wonderful models about grief, but one of them I love, Alan Wolfelt's model is a companioning model. And it's being there in that moment with that person. And they go wherever they need to go. I always encourage people to not say, I understand or I completely understand, because no, you can't understand. You can't even, you can try to put yourself in somebody's shoes. You can even experience the same type of loss, but you're not that person. Even if you try to put their shoes on, even if they fit, you're still not them. And so sometimes people, will try to say something that is meaningful. For some people, it might be comforting to even say that I have no reference, but I really appreciate that you trusted me enough to share. Even just something like that is way better than trying to come up with some placating, dorky, whatever that is not going to be helpful to that person. So coming back to your comment about some people counselors having a hard time finding that. So it's hard to find counselors who, specialize in grief and loss, but then it's aphantasia. A lot of people don't know about it. I did a presentation for counselors just in our state. And there are a lot of people who reached out to me like, whoa, I had no idea this even existed. And some counselor was like, oh my gosh, so that's what's going on with me. And I think our field has so much to learn, not just about grief and loss, but also about aphantasia. And then when you combine them too, to me, it is a disenfranchised kind of experience in a lot of ways because it's something that we don't acknowledge, but it's also because we don't know we need to acknowledge it. We don't know enough about aphantasia. And so some of the grief, the things that common grief counselors use, thinking they're being helpful, might not be helpful for somebody with aphantasia or somebody with hyperphantasia. And so I really do think that we need to educate a little bit more. So I'm kind of on a mission to be able to help do that because I don't want to have those people who come into my office saying, gosh, my counselor did this, and that, and I'm not going back. And I only came today because somebody said, you get it. And this is your area. And I just was always so humbled that they would be willing to even come on back. And even since learning about aphantasia, because it's newer for me, I can even think back of some of my clients that I have worked with, especially early on, that I wish I did approach those things a little bit differently.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I have so much to say about this too. And I am so glad that you are on this mission, Kristen. And I've been in multiple grief support groups and haven't been able to bring up aphantasia because I'm afraid it will just derail the whole support group. And so, yeah, I've often had people tell me like, oh, I hope like the memories of your mom will comfort you. And that always just that statement alone throws me into a whole loop of okay, I don't have the memories that other people may have. And I can't conjure up her voice or her image or anything. Even someone did say to me oh, I hope your mom didn't suffer. And that also just really messed with me where I was like, she had cancer for 5 years, right? So there's things that people say, and I know I try to have compassion because I realized too that I had no idea what this was like until I experienced it for myself. And even experiencing it for myself, I still don't know what it's like for other people. I just have a better idea. But for me, one of the things I want people to know is there's no timeline for this. There's no timeline for when you're done grieving. You are not done grieving. You still get hit with the intense waves, many years later, decades later from everyone that I've talked to. And sometimes the waves are just as intense as if your person died the day before. And what happened to me, I think even though this was a long illness, I was in shock at first. And I think I told several friends that, so the worst thing just happened. So I'm actually okay now. And I just hadn't yet grasped the immensity of the loss that I just had. And I'm still understanding it. For me, the intensity of the grief grew over time. And yet everyone disappeared. Not everyone, but many people were there the first week, the second week. And then as I kind of came out of shock and was really needing help, that's when people were no longer reaching out. And so what I want people to know in general is like err on the side of reaching out like much longer than you think you need to. And don't think that you need to give this person space. Like maybe someone else needs space, but they'll probably tell you if you're reaching out too much. Because I think a lot of people just kind of disappear because they are afraid, and it's very uncomfortable and they don't know what to say. But just like ask questions then, or just listen, because you can give someone the space to tell the story.
Beautifully said. All right. Speaking to the visualizers first on this one, what might be some advantages or disadvantages to being able to visualize loved ones who have passed away? And included in the visualization is the other senses as well, because I know those also play a big role for many.
So for me, some of the advantages, you could call it, is, yeah, it does offer a certain amount of comfort to be able to pull up those visual, tactile, audio memories of how this person looked like, what they sounded like, how they acted like. It can kind of give that feeling of they're not completely gone as long as I can keep them with me in my way. I do think that that can kind of have a downside in some ways, in that nothing can replace a family member. You know, no matter how good your memory is, you can never truly replace someone that you've lost. And sometimes those highly visual, highly tactile memories can make that loss all the more poignant. And it can sometimes take a life of its own. It can hit harder than you think it will. There's a whole nother set of challenges with that.
I would echo what Wolf said about it's kind of a two-edged sword, because you can call up those memories on command, and yet it's not the same. Then, of course, I think Kristen mentioned this feeling of, oh no, I can no longer remember her face, because those memories do fade, kind of getting harder and harder to call up my mom's face, my grandparents. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I don't do faces as well, but I can picture environments. I can picture my old house. I can picture grandma's house. And in that environment, I can then insert the person. Also, I'm aware of the difference between actual vision and mental vision. So if I can tell myself, this is just a mirage, I'm just enjoying a picture, not really there, I don't get too freaked out about it.
Thank you. Brett?
Yeah, no, I'm in full agreement with Cole and Michael. Sometimes being able to visualize or holding on to those memories, it's still the same act of utilizing a photo book in some cases, depending on how you're experiencing it in the moment. It's still the same behavior, for better and for worse. But I also know that for me with hyperphantasia, I've had incredible nightmares where I've had people that are very close to me. Like I've had nightmares of people like dying in my arms and stuff like that. Me waking up at like in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. and having to like call someone and waking them up and being like, "Are you okay?" So I think it really is kind of like anything else. It's moderation and just awareness of when you're participating in it and trying not to get too lost or swept up into it, and just kind of learning how to settle and just check in with yourself. But it is the idea of like being able to hold court for somebody is so important, and even doing so for yourself is also equally as important. Having people check in with you, but also to check in with yourself. And that is in itself a skill that I've been trying to learn through the help of therapy and then also just doing my own research. That is also very helpful. And sometimes just having someone to even share these thoughts with. I'm lucky to have people that are close to me that when I feel myself spiraling, or if I'm getting into an obsessive mode, or I'm visualizing something that is not benefiting me, I'm thankful to have a bunch of people that will be able to check in and be like, how can I help you? And sometimes I don't even know how to answer that question because I'm still deep in my feelings. But sometimes just even being seen or acknowledged in that way is sometimes enough to kind of help, kind of ground you a little bit in the world and in how you're feeling, and kind of help pinpoint a little, Yeah, so bringing that back to the visualization aspect, it really is. It can be both good and bad, as we've talked in previous episodes, where I'm like, it can be great. I can visualize anything I want. And then the other opposite end is, oh, God, I can visualize anything I want. If I'm in a bad mood, it's going to be a bad time.
Okay, thank you very much. Great insights there. Same question for the people with aphantasia. Let's try and identify some positives, some advantages regarding aphantasia and grief, and also some negatives. I know both of those have already come up, but anything else we'd like to say regarding that?
As somebody who can't visualize anything and spent most of my life not really realizing that other people can visualize things, still, even though I've already known this for 3 years, it seems completely like out of this world that you can visualize things and that you can see things in your mind. Like I still am like, I don't even believe it. Like a big part of me is like, isn't that disruptive? Like, isn't that disruptive to your life? Like having images suddenly pop into your head where, you're driving and you hear a song and suddenly you have an image. I'm like, that sounds dangerous. To me, it seems like a not good thing when it comes to grieving, because especially if you can't control it, because just going along my day and suddenly have an image, something reminds me of my mother and suddenly I'm seeing her. To me, that seems like it would be very difficult to function. Like I can't even imagine, honestly. And also having SDAM, between the aphantasia and the SDAM, it's like, I can't remember. I do hear things. I do have a pretty good auditory inner world, but my parents have been gone for so long that I can't hear their voices anymore. I think that being able to sort of pick and choose when you want to actually look at a physical picture is probably a good thing in terms of being able to just sort of dip your toe into the grieving process and not have it sort of visually in your face. I don't know. Yeah, to me, it seems easier. And then having that, I also have ADHD, and the SDAM. And so my out of sight, out of mind is very strong. So if I'm not looking at it, it doesn't exist. And also my sense of time, like it's either now or it's not now. And that all happened not now. And, so it's not real. Yeah, but at the same time, it's healthy to grieve. And so it becomes, I think, maybe harder to get through the grieving that you need to get through when you have these conditions. So I don't know. It's just interesting. Like I had to bring in photos of my parents to therapy in order to try to really conjure up the feeling of grief,
Stacey or Kristen, have any thoughts on that?
Oh, I'm just so glad that Elena is here and has like similar like aphantasia and SDAM, and is like also has a different experience from me. So we have different aphantasic experiences here where like I don't even know how to explain mine. It is like similar to Kristen, where seeing without seeing, like I can still think of traumatic times with my mom, and they are intrusive, and I haven't had experiences like this, at least recently. And I guess with SDAM, I don't remember if I had them with previous traumas or not. But right now, I really am confused about it. But like one of my thoughts sometimes is that aphantasia makes me a little more present in the moment. And when like my present moment is like unbearable grief, I can't distract myself from it. Like maybe aphantasia is playing a role there. Maybe it's just my personality. Like there's no way I'll know. But it feels like I just have to sit with it, and I'm forced to. Like my personality has put me at the opposite end of the spectrum where I just like can't distract myself. I'm confused about it myself. So if someone else can explain my own brain to me, I would love that. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
I think for me, I didn't really know there was anything different. Like I've always had this very active imagination, and, I always thought I could visualize really well, not knowing people actually could see images. That really floored me so much when I learned that people actually could see things. And it sometimes pops me into this, whoa, what else don't I know? There's so many things we're still learning. And I think there's things we're still going to be learning about aphantasia as well. But I will say there are some times where I really, really wish I could close my eyes and see not just behind the screen, but see like it was a dream kind of thing, and where it's, really happening kind of thing. I would love that. But then at the same time, I could also see how that'd be incredibly painful for certain situations. And so I kind of have some mixed feelings about it all as I've been learning more about aphantasia and just my own brain and how it works and how I process things, including loss. And I think everybody's so unique, and what one person might want might be a little bit different than somebody else. But I hope that we can help decrease the stigma of talking about grief and loss, and that we can hold space for different ways of experiencing things, from nothing with aphantasia to hyperphantasia. I think every single person is going to be different. I do remember what that was like the day when I was struggling, pulling up that image in my mind of my mom and just thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose that image. I might kept some pictures close by just so I could have them, because then when I see them, it kind of recalls things for me. Yeah, I don't have any quick answers or anything on that, but I just think it's going to be different for each person of, what they'll find advantageous or not. I know what I'm used to, but as I learn more, like people who can see images, I'm like, oh my gosh, I would love to, I think as you put it, Shane, test drive that for, a day or something.
All right. Very good. Thank you, guys. I have just a couple questions for the visualizers, because I have aphantasia and I'm curious about what it's like for y'all. So I was wondering, is there a difference between looking at an actual picture versus looking at it in your mind? Is there a distinction between those two? And does one influence you better than the other? Are they identical? Any insights on that?
I can do both. I can visualize picture. I can actually remember pictures that I had growing up of my parents and my family members and grandparents. But I can also visualize people in the third dimension space, which is kind of weird. I kind of have like a cartoon brain about it a little bit. What I mean by that is that, like, as an example, my grandmother passed away many years ago. I can visualize not only pictures that I have of her when she was alive, when she was with my grandfather, who was alive at the time. I can also visualize inside the photo. Like, I can actually see them like posing, and I can also see them as if I'm the photographer walking around them. And I could still see, like, as if I'm in the plane of view with them, if that makes any sense. But then I can also visualize both of them in memories that I've had with them. I can pull up memories that I've had with them, like these crystallized moments and stuff like that. Like, I remember one of the last living moments I've seen my grandfather, him going through chemotherapy and crying and being little kids kind of ushered off to the room because it was such an emotional scene, and it was very difficult in the moment because my grandfather was a very stoic individual. I remember those memories that had actually happened, but I can also remember good memories as well of, of both my grandmother and my grandfather just laughing and whatnot. And those moments that I have that I can recall back to kind of help remind me of the good times that I've had with them, for sure. But yeah, I can definitely visualize photos, non-photos. I can memorize. I can see them doing things that I've never seen them do before. Like, my grandmother never learned how to drive a car because my grandfather always drove. The old school Irish Catholic type of folk my grandparents were, in the best of ways. But I can totally picture I can visualize my grandmother in the back of a Buick Skylark just tearing down the highway, yelling at people, screaming "Bless your heart" at passerbys. But I'm very thankful that I can do that too. But to even undercut myself is that I still remember, I still have all these memories of when I was, when I was a bad young kid, when I frustrated my parents or when I frustrated my grandparents. I have all those memories are still in there somewhere. Sometimes I can control which one I can pick out, but the same thing, sometimes something will pop up and a memory that I didn't want will pop up in my head. And it's not like my entire brain shuts down, but it does divide my attention for sure.
What you said, Brent, kind of made me think. So, do you see the pictures almost like animated, like in Harry Potter? You know how their pictures kind of are like movies in the newspapers and such.
Yeah. They can be like that, but for me, it's a lot of. It's almost like when you do a life drawing. If you've gone to a life drawing class where you're drawing from real life and you see an object and then you walk around it to get different aspects of it. I can do that as well, depending on what the subject is. It's not always every single thing, but in specific instances, especially if I'm very familiar with the subject matter, I can.
What's interesting too is so you mentioned your grandma not driving. My grandma could drive, but the moment you mentioned that, I thought of a story that I was not privy to. I'm not part of this. This happened before I was even born, but my mom would tell us a story of when she and her brother and sister were going absolutely bonkers and driving her crazy. She would just have had enough of it and say, she walked out, she grabbed her purse and keys and head out the door. And they'd say, "Where are you going?" And she'd say, I'm going crazy. And they said, "Oh, can we come?" And she said, "Yeah, you're driving me." But the thing is, I can picture her doing that.
Yeah.
Crazy. And grandma, maternal grandmother died back in 1988. So my memories of her are starting to fade. But you mentioning that story just kind of brought this little movie I had in my mind and have had since Mom told me the story of when she was young. I just kind of made that movie in my head, and your words kind of made it go on instant replay just now. And I can picture her in the house that I knew her in. I'm sure that's not where it happened, but that's kind of where I placed the story. So I take these pictures and images and compile my own almost AI-like fake video.
I think most people, generally speaking, like to engage with other people to help inspire those types of moments and feelings within people, which is a very special thing. But, it's difficult because it's all very nebulous and it's all, and it speaks more to the idea of why I gravitated so much to. I'm very thankful for Shane for doing this series. Is the fact is that it is such an awareness of not only yourself and how your brain operates, but how other people's brain operates is something that when you hear it, you're like, oh, of course, this should totally be something that should probably be in the topic of conversation when dealing with most intersocial situations, but we just haven't gotten there yet. And just talking about it, even in this context, I feel is special in of itself. So, yeah.
Sometimes it's involuntary, and sometimes you just say, give me the prompt and I'll build a still image or a video.
Yeah.
Whatever you need. Of course, I tell my wife this all the time. I really wish we could have just brain to brain interface. So
yeah,
we could just upload videos to each other's heads and solve a lot of communication problems, I think, because I hate indeterminate pronouns. So when she says, "Put that there," I'm like, okay, there's many objects that are several places. What exactly are you talking about?
Yeah. Put up the projector. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else anyone is dying to say before we sign off?
I'm just so grateful that I could be here and share this time and moment and have these conversations. We need more open conversations and no judgment, no telling people what they should do or not do, but just sharing. And there's just so much to learn from each other in the process of doing that, while at the same time holding space for what people have experienced.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is just wonderful. And I really appreciate the way all of your brains work.
Just personally speaking, I think this is one of the most important and beautiful conversations that we've ever had on the podcast. It was really touching and very meaningful and very insightful, and I learned a ton. And one of the things that came to my mind was, we came here today and we talked a lot about
our differences and how we're different and how we experience things differently. What I came away with was, at a deeper human level, we are all the same.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.